I'm here with my friend and colleague, Rob McClure. Rob is an assistant professor of composition and theory at OU with me. He's the first in what is hopefully going to be kind of a fun summer series that we're doing with this new music degree in the School of Music. It's the Contemporary Music and Digital Instrument program. And Rob and I have been chatting a little bit about this, but we just thought we would get together. So Rob, good to see you virtually.
Good to see. Yeah, of course, virtually, right? But good to see you. I love the stacks and stacks and stacks of keyboards you got behind you and the mixer to your right. That's awesome.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
mixer is a little bit daunting, honestly. It's the Behringer X32, and it's got just so much stuff in there, and
hmm
I'm sitting down with the user manual trying to get through it. You know,
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, we just this past year we purchased a digital mixer in the the electronic surround lab, and it's a Yamaha. Now I can't remember what the specs of it are, but it's a brand new Yamaha mixer. And I had Yamaha mixers when I taught at a school in China. I've had Yamaha mixers when I was a doctoral student,
yeah,
and I'm just trying to get back in touch with it a little bit. We did a concert in the fall with it, or yeah, a concert in the fall with it, and maybe one in the spring with it too, before we went on lockdown, of course. Um, and it was definitely a learning experience getting back into like live mixing. Oh my gosh.
yeah.
So
Well, and I remember walking into your studio after you got it and set it up, and you had like everything possible plugged into it. I mean, it seemed like you had
pretty
every
much, yeah.
input to use.
Yeah. Yeah, we had mics, we had a couple different no input mixers that were running through it. We had a theremin, we had, just our 8 channel or 10 channel interface. Just everything was going through it, just to like get some practice, I guess, with trying to run a show where you're going to have like, okay, well, they've got their setup, we've
Yeah.
got the house set up, how's it going to all work? But yeah, we're getting there. I mean, I kind of put it away right when COVID hit, because I didn't want to have to disinfect it ever, you know.
Well, and
Like,
that's what I'm wondering about, like for this fall for us, right? If like we're gonna have all this, if students are playing in these ensembles and using digital instruments, how are we gonna keep them clean, right?
I
And
know.
not ruin the equipment, but keep everybody safe, and maybe a checkout system. This is yours for the semester.
Right.
I haven't really thought that through all the way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're I, I'm just gonna try to, as much as possible, like just keep stuff put away, but also let students know, like, hey, this is here. You can use it. You can have it. We're just not gonna just leave it out for
Right.
anyone to touch.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
I'm trying to find a balance for my, because I'm in my basement, and I have limited room if I don't want to take over my entire house. And so my son and I get back in this little cove here, and he's been playing the iwi that we got from this Akai iwi,
mhm.
and we were using a Boss looping station, one that it's the 505 where you can use your hands to
Yeah.
record it, but it's really hard as a keyboard player or somebody playing with their fingers to like start that loop. So we got the 300 series from Boss. That's a foot pedal. It's only got 3 inputs, but it's working pretty good for the EWI and for the keyboards, which is
Mhm.
nice. But I'm trying to route everything. Like what do I want this to do, and then I run it through the digital mixer, and then or do I want to go into a regular mix? Like just I have like a uh, my basic Mackie mixer that is also
Mhm.
works pretty well for like routing stuff to the loop station. So I'm just trying to figure out how I want to get things set up to perform in the way that I feels like natural. Um, and then once
Yeah,
I'm done
yeah.
with that, is like, then how can I do this better? Ask people like, where am I messing up here? What's inefficient in this setup?
Yeah, I'm also down in my basement, and I mean, you can see I have like a little MIDI controller
Yeah,
over here, but um, over, like, I have this little built-in shelf. I've
nice.
got another computer that is just kind of a Logic, another interface, no input mixer, and the keyboard, and then like a little Korg Nano Control. And I've been doing some stuff like in the over break, and it all kind of started before we went into lockdown, and I've just kind of kept refining this thing. I guess it's a piece, it has a title, but it's one of these things that, it is basically just a vehicle for me to perform. It's largely improvised. It has kind of a structure, but it's using no input. And it was originally using voice and no input. And I've kind of moved away from that to using like a keyboard and no input. And I don't know, it's just something, kind of fun to
Is that what you
to
were?
mess
That was
around.
going on when I ran upstairs.
Yeah, that's what it is. So I've kind of built so the Max MSP class that I'm going to be teaching in actually this coming fall. I use this book called what is it called? Sound Design and no. Where is it? Oh, it's not on my shelf. Huh. It's called Sound Design and Electronic Music or something like that, and it's by these two Italian authors, uh, Mauricio Giri and oh, is it Cipriani? Yeah, it's Cipriani and Giri, these two Italian authors, and they have 2 volumes of this book, and they're coming out with a third. I cannot wait for the third volume to come out. But for me, it's the best textbook that kind of takes you through how to do stuff in Max that I've found so far, and that's what I used to teach. And going through that textbook, I've like learned a lot. Like I had been working with Max since I was a doctoral student. So before I started using this book, I had already had, I don't know, like maybe 7 or 8 years in Max. And then I opened this book and started teaching from it. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much more cool stuff. I mean, that's the thing about Max. It's just a never ending, like it's a rabbit hole. And you choose when you decide to stop going deeper down it. But through that, through kind of teaching a section of that book about sequencing and building like a step sequencer, I kind of took some stuff that is already kind of built in the book and modified it for my purposes. And basically, like I'm able to record sound into a short buffer, and then using the step sequencer, which has a lot of different parameters to it. I have like 5 different step sequencers that can play all at the same time, and they're all like matched to the same clock, so they'll line up perfectly. And basically I've just been I'll turn the reverb down a little bit, but I've been yeah, it's pretty long reverb. But I've been just routing the keyboard into it, and I can record just a sound and then just turn the sequencer on, and I'll isolate a bit, but that's where you're getting like the bass thing from, and that has some different things in it too. And then so that kind of provides like a little rhythmic backdrop. And on top of that, I've either been playing keyboard, so obviously not very well, but but doing stuff like that. And then the other thing I have routed into it, which was actually the keyboard is something completely new. this all started just with the no input mixer, and I was like basically doing the same stuff, like getting a sound
Yeah.
from the no input mixer and then throwing it into one of those step sequencers. But now that I can actually control pitch a little bit more easily, I can, kind of mess with harmonies a little bit more in the sequencer, and then kind of solo with the no input over it. So So that's one thing I've kind of been messing around with in this break,
Yeah, and the reverb's still going. That's what we were laughing
Yeah,
about.
I just turned it off.
So when you're talking about no input mixer, right? You want to explain that? Because I don't think a lot of people understand like the process of doing that.
Sure. So I won't bring it back too much, but basically what I have here is just a Mackie 1202 old mixer. We used to have these hanging around in different classrooms in the School of Music, and then I kind of found them in a closet, and I was like, well, we have a bunch of these, and they're really old, and I don't necessarily trust them to do any real like mixing. And for anyone watching or listening that thinks, oh, that's pretty cool, I want to do something with that, once you do this, you ruin the mixer. So make sure you're not doing it with a good mixer that you want to, actually use to project sound. But for stuff like this, it's perfect, So what I have is essentially like my main outputs are going into my other interface here. And that's going to the interface that it's a lot of interfaces right now, but it could obviously go directly in. It's just I'm trying to keep different things in different places right now. But the main outs are going there. But then on a mixer, you have all of these other auxiliary outs. So my auxiliary sends are routed back into the inputs of the tracks 1, 2, and 3. And then I also have, there's what's called a tape output. I mean, obviously it's not going to be, we're not using tape players anymore, but that you have tape inputs and tape outputs if you were running to like a tape player or something. So you can take those outputs as well and route them into other channels. So essentially a no input mixer is a mixer that has no external input, but the outputs are routed back into the inputs. And what that does is it just creates feedback loops. Yeah. Because essentially you are just amplifying the electronic, the noise that is inherent in a mixer. You're just amplifying that in a feedback loop. So what that produces is, either different rhythms or pitches or whatever. And it totally depends on where you route which output into which input, and then which you either mute or have running at the same time. So if you spend enough time with a setup and you don't change it, you can kind of learn what it can do. Like for instance, I knew right when I turned that on, it was going to be playing a D flat because my knobs were set up in the right way. And I know that if I just turn that first knob clockwise, I'll get that. Let's see, I still have stuff running. So basically I'll get that melody of. What's going on? I mean, that sounds cool.
Can you turn your instrument inputs a little bit down?
Yeah,
just a little bit. I think it's distorting a tiny bit. So
Yeah, but I shouldn't have any. Let me figure this out for a second. I should have a clean input here. Oh, well. So I'm gonna get that like D flat, C, A flat. That's the melody I'm gonna get if I just keep turning it counterclockwise. So you just kind of learn what the mixer can do in which configurations.
Yeah.
It takes a long time because it's not logical. It's
Now,
like, if I should turn it this way and it should go up, right? Nope, it doesn't. It goes down, or it just turns into a rhythm or something.
If you had a different mixer and you set it up the same way, would it give you the same results?
You mean the same brand, but like just a physically different mixer?
Yeah.
Or like a different. There are some similarities. Definitely. I think that certainly if you have different mixers, you're going to get different results. Meaning like different brands, different input and output setups.
Okay.
I don't know that we actually had two of the same mixer to actually try that out,
right?
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, like, from a compositional standpoint, if you were going to write a piece and you wanted to find a way to communicate parameters to somebody, and notate it in a way that other people can reproduce your idea, right? Because that would be cool. I mean, composers want that.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how you would convey that idea. Or maybe it's not meant to be that. Maybe it's meant to be, this is just a live performance in this space at this time, and let it go out into the ether,
Yeah. So I originally got into no input mixing because I think it was my first year here. We had a composition area recital, and it was fall. Fall is always a difficult time for the area recitals for composition because they usually don't have anything ready yet. But I still for the kids that finished last year, they have pieces that they wrote last year and want to get them done on the fall concert. But anyway, it was my first semester and we didn't really have pieces. At we only had a 30-minute show or something like that, and I was like, we're not doing that. So a recent graduate, TR Beery, who was in the master's program, he and I we found these mixers and we started messing around with them, and we just decided, hey, let's improvise for 20 minutes on no input mixers, and that'll close the show, and that way we'll have a proper recital length. And then he started to get into it more. He took one of the mixers and recorded some sounds with it and made an 8-channel fixed media piece that has gotten him into Seamus and ICMC and different festivals for electronic music around the country and worldwide. And I was like, oh man, you really got some cool stuff out of that.
Yeah.
And then he and I decided together, well, wouldn't it be so cool if we had a live performance piece? It wasn't fixed in any way, but it could be, we could replicate it. So we actually decided to write a piece together where we really try to do the same things in a certain order. So we figured out okay, well, my mixer can do this, your mixer can do that. How do we put these different modules together? And we made a piece that had just it's very loose notation. It's mostly graphic notation. Because we wanted the ability to someone else with other mixers or other instruments in general. We made it so that, acoustic players could play this. We wanted it so that anyone could pick it up and play it, no matter what configuration they have. As long as they can make these sounds in general, they could play this piece. So we did that, and we performed that the first time on the Athens Film Festival for an after party, and then we've done it a couple other times, and we had the new music ensemble at OU do it. They had some wind players, some piano players, a percussionist, some string players, and they realized this piece that we originally wrote on no input mixers, because we left it so loose
Mhm.
you know, so open, I guess. And yeah, I've just been like, this has been a slow process of figuring out like what can you do with it. And I you were talking about, you know, like COVID projects. Um, I did something earlier this in April that I would tell my students never to do. I wrote a piece for a competition, which I usually tell people it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
Um, but this one was electronic miniatures, 3 minutes or less. I was like, okay, I can do that, you know, and still feel good about the fact that I'm going to get some mileage out of this piece, as opposed to what I would tell my students. If you're writing like a full scale piece and you're writing it for a competition that's like super weird, it's like, oh, we want pieces for piccolo and banjo and tuba and accordion.
Mhm.
Well, come on, you know, like that's going to be really difficult to get
Yeah.
that piece played anywhere else. So don't do that. Just, if you want to write that piece, find people to like who you don't have to win a competition to get them to play it.
Sure.
But anyway, I had so many samples from the no input that I'd been just recording. Like anytime I work with it, I just hit record, and you know, I have this library of sounds. So I wrote a all no input piece for Fixed Media, and that was like when stuff started to get locked down, and you know, I'm sure you saw people on social media saying like, oh, use this time, you know, like Shakespeare wrote Macbeth or whatever play, or Hamlet in a quarantine or something like that. And like I was getting really anxious
Yeah.
because I wasn't writing, and I felt really bad about it. You know, because I kept seeing all these people on social media like, you should be writing, you take this opportunity, blah 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 blah. And I had a piece that I was working on, but it just seemed like it was way too heavy. You know, it was a bigger piece, and I took some advice from my friend Jamie Lee Sampson, who's also a composer, and she's a co-founder of Adjective New Music, a collective that I'm in, and they have a publishing company. And she basically said like, look, for right now, don't, you know, do something small,
Yeah.
just like take the pressure off yourself, do a little thing. And that was something, because you know, you're working on Fixed Media, you get instant feedback, which
Yeah.
is great, because you know, I'm writing a flute quartet, and I was like, is this going to work? I don't know, you know. And it's like, I want this to be a good piece, but I don't really have that kind of instant feedback to know if like this thing I'm writing is actually going to work. And it was just a good way to like kickstart some creativity, just working on something really small, that I had a deadline for, that I had to meet. And it was great. So, and writing that little piece made me think like, oh well, what else do I have around here that I can like write a little piece about, you know?
Yeah.
So it was
Well,
pretty good.
I really like that idea of doing something small, because at the beginning of quarantine, I had a lot. There was a huge push of creative output. Like there was
Yeah.
so much stuff going on, and it was really exciting. And I was like, oh man, I want to create. I want to do these things with people. And
Hmm.
then you got this kind of weight, you know, this kind of crushing, oh, I need to make something substantial. And
Yeah.
in the midst of, I mean, the first week of quarantine was kind of, in a weird way, was kind of freeing, because it's like I'm at home. I can really be super hyper focused. But then after that, it's like, wow, how am I going to keep teaching? How am I going to keep my family safe? And all those
Yeah.
pressures sit on you. And then now you're like, well, I'm going to create, but I'm exhausted. You know, I'm just kind of
Hmm.
stressed out. There's a lot of anxiety, and so you had these big ideas, and then they had to be put down into, like you did, 3 minutes, right? It's like,
Yeah.
but even doing something that's creative, that's 3 minutes long, can be exhausting, right? 3 minutes
Hmm.
is still something substantial. I mean, we play, people play pieces by, you know, historical classical musicians, and they're small little snippets of things, like Schoenberg's. The piece
Oh
like
yeah.
30 seconds long, you know, 40 seconds long, and it's
Hmm.
deep and it's got a lot of meaning to it. So but I was feeling like, big, I got to do these big projects, and then, you know, creating something small, like something that's attainable, has some value. Maybe it becomes part of something bigger, but it's still, it's still there. It's a chapter in a book. If you try to start out writing the whole book, it's daunting.
Yeah, totally. And the word you just used, attainable.
Yeah.
That was really something that was important for that particular project. And it just kind of got everything moving a little bit. And I was able to take that kind of those feelings of sadness and guilt over like, oh, you have all this time, create, and actually put them to something.
Yeah.
And that I've been pretty productive after that. I wrote an 11-minute saxophone duo that has been premiered. It was premiered. There was no audience. It was on a YouTube live concert, and
Okay.
they've done
Sure. I mean, it's different world, right? That counts.
Yeah, of course
Yeah.
it counts. Like, there was an audience. We weren't all in the same room. There is no physical program that I have, but it doesn't matter. It happened. And we have proof. The YouTube video is still up there. But it was this group that they started doing weekly concerts, like Thursday afternoon concerts. And they were friends with Jamie Lee Sampson, who I just mentioned, and they offered to the collective, the composer collective that I'm in, like, hey, does anyone want to write us miniatures? And I'm like, yes. That sounds attainable right now.
Sure.
I can write 6 short pieces that form a bigger piece, but I can do those like hyper focus things right now.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that, it had a deadline, which is always great. Deadlines are amazing. And I was able to get it done. But yeah, I think right now, like, I mean, social media is always going to be a pressure. You're always going to have, like, look out and see, oh, they're doing this and they're doing this and they're doing this and they're doing this. What am I doing? And it just piles up and piles up. And you have to just remember that all those other people are feeling the same way. It's just they're being more vocal about the small things that they're doing.
Yeah.
And you're seeing it, and you have to remember, like, it's okay. It's okay if you don't write anything. Like, it's a heavy time right now, and like you said, how do I keep my family safe? How do I start doing homeschool? How do I do that simultaneously with teaching online, with my job, and like planning for the future, and be creative in all of that? And it's like, and I think, like, one of my friends just told me, it's okay. You don't have to do anything right now. Just because social media is putting this pressure on everyone to, like, make something good out of a bad situation, it's okay. You can, like, stew in it for a while and write when you're ready to write.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, because, people, when they're creating right now, there are very few outlets to share creation, right? And it has to be digital. And so that just becomes like, I'm just going to push all this information in that way. And then I don't know how you feel. I know that when, because my undergraduate was in composition, right? And so I went into jazz after that, and it was still a lot of writing. But when I'm looking at a blank page, that is overwhelming.
Terrifying.
It is. And you're like, I've got all these possibilities in the world. And if I don't just get pen on paper, or whatever your way of composing is, if I don't make that first gesture, like, I'm frozen. And with COVID, there's just this other huge heavy weight, because all the other things you do to release stress and to do other things, you can't do them anymore. Like, just wanting to go out to see a movie, you can't do it. So, like, you're even more hesitant. And then, like, the only way I can share this is digitally, and digital is forever. And so I put this thing out there, and I don't know the feedback that I'm going to get. And if I don't get good feedback, it's going to take this already really heavy weight and just push all the wind out of you. And I feel, if I was younger, I would probably feel a little bit less of that. But when you get older, and you've got, like, the ego thing kicking in, and what it is you're supposed to be doing as a professional, and putting it out there, it's it's a lot. It's overwhelming, right? So I think like your idea of taking, just getting started, like jump started, a couple minutes of some work and just say, I did this, it's out there, is a really great way to go about doing stuff. One of my children, Emily, they been doing all these little videos like with their
Mhm.
iPad, and they have some characters they've created and they're making short films, and they were starting to get a little bit like they would share it and they would feel bad. They like, I don't really like this isn't good. I said, okay, delete it,
Yeah.
like erase it. And then all of a sudden they had freedom just to start shooting like different scenes, and if they don't work, the ability just to release it, to do something, get rid of it, and you still created something, right? But it
Yeah.
doesn't mean it has to be something that you're going to share, right? It still has value to you, but if it jump starts you into a bigger project, there's a ton of value in that.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. I mean, the that I think that's something I tell my students a lot is, you just need to get something down. You just need to turn the key and start the
Yeah.
ignition. As soon as you do that, like things will come. Maybe they'll be good, maybe they'll be bad. It doesn't matter. You just got to keep going because that's sitting here and thinking about the weight of everything and oh man, I gotta write this big piece and it's got to be perfect and oh my god, I'm gonna be judged against the masters of history and what does that even mean and blah 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 blah, and it's like, nah, dude, you just need to write like 10 measures today, that's it.
Yeah.
And I personally, I keep a I have like composition notebooks where I keep all my ideas and stuff, but I
Uh-huh.
also kind of keep a daily kind of journal
Nice.
almost on like what did I do today?
uh,
Just so I can look back, and if I get to the feeling like, oh man, I'm not making any progress on this piece, I can just look back and say, you wrote 20 measures of fast intricate music today. That's something to be proud of,
yeah.
and just like like keep reminding yourself that like slow steady progress is progress.
Sure. And then like
Yeah.
to keep it playful too, right? It's just,
Yeah.
if you overwhelm
Oh.
yourself with this end product, I've got to do this big thing. That's not fun. It's not play. And for
Mhm.
me, a lot of creativity comes out. I mean, we can create in times of great stress, right? And
Mhm.
or in times of peace, people will go to art colonies and they'll just put themselves in a room for a month and just do a ton of output. But not everybody works like that. And
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was something that right at the beginning of this, I really had to kind of flip the switch on how I usually work. And I say usually, but it's only been in the last couple of years that I've actually found something that has worked for me.
okay.
I really like to be the person that can have, a stretch of 2 or 3 weeks of just uninterrupted, you know, 8, 10, 12 hours a day of writing.
Mm.
And very rarely get that opportunity. I mean, most people don't get that opportunity. You kind of have to fit it in where you can, especially, having a job, being a parent, all these things. Students absolutely have this situation where it's like, oh, well, I need to, be creative every day, but I have 7 hours of classes today and I have
Yeah.
this hour in between everything. And that's really awkward. And so I've, the last couple of years, I've really used the breaks to do a lot of my writing, either
Mm.
summer or winter breaks. And, my mother-in-law has just been amazing in her ability to just like, hey, I'm going to take your kids for 2 weeks, have fun writing, and yeah, I know she's a
Yeah.
saint. I love her so much. Um, anyway, but now with that, like none of that is happening,
Right.
so the kids are always in the house. They're bored. It's summer, but we can't go anywhere. We can't do anything. They
Right.
can't go see their friends, so it's a lot of like, okay, I need to refigure out how to write in like 1 hour increments,
Yeah. It's a shift of like your work environment changes.
Yeah.
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 I mean,
Yeah, definitely.
mine hasn't, I mean, what I've been doing since COVID is, I haven't been doing a lot of like, I wouldn't say I'm not writing. I'm not doing a lot of playing or practicing in the sense that I would maybe normally do.
Hmm.
Because I'm just using it as a time to explore, because you see all the stuff behind me. So I'm just trying to learn a bunch of things that
Yeah.
I have a cursory knowledge of, but I want to understand it a little deeper. And so, your idea of a log, like what did you do today,
Hmm.
is actually kind of cool, because I sometimes I wake up and I'm doing work by 8 o'clock. I'm up at
Yeah.
7. I got the coffee, said hello to my kids, and then all of a sudden it's noon, and I'm like, what did I just do for
Yeah.
4 hours? And then the next thing you know, it's dinner at 6. What did I just do for 5 hours? And if you logging it helps you kind of like, are you being lazy? You slacking off, and you look at, oh, this is what I did all day. I'm still being productive. It's just not
Yeah.
the same type of production in the same way I've always done it. And that's okay.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that kind of behind the scenes stuff, like learning a new piece of software or learning a new piece of hardware, or just like doing the work to get yourself ready to actually produce something that
Right.
you can touch or you can hear or whatever. That work still takes a lot of time and is super super important. And yeah, and like my, you said keep it light. My my notes to myself are sometimes like hilarious. I'm writing to myself as if I'm another person, so it's very like a little self-deprecating sometimes, but I look back and I was like, oh, it's like I remember that feeling of like, man, you suck today. Like, and oh, you did great work today. You should be really proud of this.
Yeah.
Or you read a book. And that was like that's important too, because your brain just needed a refresh.
Sure. Sure.
So
How are you
yeah.
feeling with like class preparation for the fall? I know that I'm trying to do a whole bunch of things, right? There's a lot going on,
Mhm.
like as far as the world, but then also like our jobs, our professions, right? And summer has always been a time for me to kind of recenter a little bit. I
Mhm.
like to, as soon as the semester is over, I just like to shut down email for a week, and I just like to walk away and breathe. And we can't do that right now.
Yeah.
So I finding like my class preparation, and I have some unique situations where I'm rebuilding a class, and it's a class that I'm not even going to teach this fall. So that has a
Mhm.
new layer on it. But what's like, what are you doing? I got a gnat flying around. I don't know what's going on. I keep but is the extra layer of how you're going to instruct in the fall kind of impeding some of your normalcy and your normal process of work, or
I will say that you know, especially in the last couple of weeks, because um, actually my mother-in-law is they're living down in South Carolina right now, and
okay?
they're finally able to come back to Ohio where they live normally. It's long story, it doesn't matter, but she's going to come and stay with us for a couple weeks. So I have this like on the very near horizon. I'm going to get that time to work as I normally work, and I'm just kind of like I'm working on this piece right now, and it's difficult. Like it's a piece that I'm doing a lot of things I haven't done before,
Yeah.
and the writing is kind of super intricate. Whereas in the past, I would have just said, "Hey, let's make it all aleatoric, and it'll sound intricate." But I'm kind of moving away from that for many different reasons. So I feel like it's going slow. It's going slower than it should. I
Okay.
feel like I should be further than I should be at this point, given the how much of the like behind the scenes work I've done. Um, so I have that, like, I'm going to get those 2 weeks to really dig into this piece on the horizon.
Hmm.
So right now, when I am kind of like not feeling it, I don't really want to get into writing nitpicky rhythms today. That's
Uh-huh.
actually when I go and like plan my classes.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so I'm kind of using it as almost as an escape from writing,
Yeah.
like just so I don't burn out on the piece too fast. I can step back and say, okay, I'm just going to let things kind of stew for a day,
Hmm.
and I'll plan my composition lessons and get those, get the syllabi in order, and get the listening lists in order, and try to do as much of that stuff as possible, and get the like the Blackboard like master courses
Hmm.
kind of done and stuff like that, so I can keep reusing this stuff. And so yeah, it hasn't really impeded like my creative process. It's actually been kind of a welcome like thing to step away from the creative
Interesting.
process. Yeah.
That's a cool perspective because I, excuse me, I think, for some of mine, like there's a lot of stuff I want to be doing that I would normally do in my summers, and it's interrupted because I'm having to change what's going to happen in the fall.
Sure.
But I could take it as a break from what I normally do and just be like, make that happen. Can I ask you? There's you teach a couple advanced classes in like computer music and stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, can you talk about like what you do in those classes, maybe
Sure.
philosophically, or what are some of the outcomes you're looking for your students in those classes?
Hmm. So I basically teach three separate classes in electronic music, 4130, and its corresponding 5130 for grad students. 4130 is kind of history and practice of electronic music. So in
Hmm.
that class, we really dig into history. We do a lot of listening. There is some composition, some software that we
Hmm.
do, but it's pretty minimal.
You're talking
It's
about
more
like
of a
historical process and historical creation, and from
yeah.
early tape music and trains and stuff, like all that stuff.
Yeah. So we the first project is okay. This is These are what the composers had available to them when they were just working with tape. These are the
Yeah,
effects. This is all you can do. Even though you have Logic in front of you and you have all these crazy effects that you
yeah,
can use, you can't. You have to be creative with just these like 7 effects or something like that, or
yeah,
7 techniques.
yeah.
So they're really the projects in there are really hyper focused, and their focus is to give you a historical perspective of electronic music.
Hmm.
4150, it has I don't it's like music, computers and music production or something. Like, it has a terrible name because I don't really do what the name is.
Yeah, because
40
production is a very different process.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And classes like that are by and large covered in the media arts school. So I wanted to take this class
Uh-huh.
and do something that is creative with it.
Yeah.
That is meant to be more like a composition class.
Cool.
So that's unfortunately what I was teaching this past semester. And it's unfortunate because what we do in there is we write a stereo fixed media piece, and then we write an 8-channel fixed media piece. So 8-channel surround, you can't do that unless you have the 8 speakers.
Right. Right.
So we had to really pivot that class hard. And
Okay.
I kind of feel bad for the students that were in there because they didn't get to do, what the class was designed to do. I
Yeah,
have a lot of
I had the same thing in my jazz methods class. The way I built my class was basically after spring break, they were all going to be conducting jazz bands. They were going to be
yeah.
conducting their peers. And all of a sudden, we can't do it. And if I had known, I would have changed. I mean, who knew, right? But if I felt like they lost the experience of the way that the class was designed, and there was just no way to go back and fix it, right? So you just have to make the best of a bad situation.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
kind of what we did. And but in the future, that class will kind of be that again.
yeah,
It's
cool.
composition in electronic music, and getting to, dig way deeper into technique,
Hmm.
and also dig way deeper into music that's being written right now
Yeah,
by contemporary electronic music composers. So that's what that class is. And then 4170, which I'm offering in the fall, is computer music programming.
yeah.
So we use Max MSP. I guess they just call it Max. That sounds weird to me to say, but we use Max for that course, and it starts from scratch. Max is a language, and to be able to learn a new language, you have to develop vocabulary, syntax, and then start putting all of those things together to make more complex thoughts.
Hmm.
And that's what you have to do with Max. So you have to develop a large vocabulary of objects. each object in a Max patch will have basically one function. Like the cycle tilde object just produces a sine wave. That's all it does. And then you can attach a number box to that to define the frequency of the sine wave, and you can take a cable away from that sine wave and plug it into a multiplier or a gain object, and then out. So it's like all of these different little objects that that you're plugging into each other, and this modifies that, and at the end of it, you should get a sound. And we start out pretty simply, like anyone could take that class because we start from scratch.
Yeah.
And but we also go a long way in just a semester. They learn about additive synthesis, subtractive synthesis, sampling, delay lines, and they end up producing some pretty intricate stuff.
Yeah.
The last time I taught it, I had my students kind of, for their final project, because it's not really an environment where after a semester you can just write a piece with it.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of have to like sit with this knowledge for a while and then like start applying it to other things, and which many of my students who took that class have. In subsequent semesters, they've written pieces with Max.
Yeah.
But for the first one, I just wanted them to kind of make almost just an audio installation type thing.
Yeah.
Something you can turn on, it does stuff, and that stuff is perhaps randomized, so it's never the same thing twice. And then it goes until you turn it off. And we had some really, really cool projects come out of that. Recent graduate, he just graduated this spring, Ben Baker. He did like an installation piece, and he also brought in video that he had shot, or not that he had shot, but it was like kind of old-timey stock footage, and he used the video to inform the audio. So he digitally synthesized like wind sounds and like creak door sounds and stuff like that, and it was really fantastic. I had another kid who basically built a patch where if you walked up to it and pressed different buttons, you could make it seem like you were having a lightsaber battle.
Oh,
Like he synthesized sounds of light. I mean, it's not exactly like the lightsaber, but it's pretty close. And the fact is, like, he had to think about, well, what does a lightsaber sound like, and how am I going to create that using the tools that I have? So Max MSP is something to where if you have that language, you can create anything you want to.
And it's a tool to take your ideas and put them out there, right? You're not, I think so many people look at like electronic instruments or whatever we want to call them, right? They they can do a set of things rather than saying, what can this do to convey my, like, what I hear, what I think.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, I wanted to make it sound like a lightsaber, and that process of deconstructing what those sounds actually are, you're asking the technology to solve a problem, not to solve your kind of idea, right? Rather than a piece of technology limiting you to what that technology supposedly can and cannot do.
Right. And Max was really designed as like a digital version of an analog synthesizer. Old school analog synthesizer where you can patch cables and this voltage controls this aspect of the sound and all that kind of stuff. So it was built with that kind of in mind. And when you think about that, those old analog synthesizers, they could do so many different things. It's really when you get into the digital synthesizers, where they were more produced for the consumer and not for like the technician or the composer. Once you get into those, it's like, oh, well, okay, this is my vibraphone sound, or this is my this sound, and you can't really like get under the hood and change it very much.
Yeah.
But with Max or those old school, analog synthesizers, you can create so many different things because you're working with the building blocks of sound. I mean, one thing like I really like to think about Max and composition in general. It's like, it's just like you're getting the Legos out. I mean, Legos by themselves are not that interesting. They're just blocks. But when you have enough of them and you have an idea and you can put them all together to make this really complex structure, then they become super, super cool.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of building, and you become almost more of a sound architect when you're working with Max. And I mean, truly, you are a sound designer. You're designing sounds from the building blocks.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's a really, really powerful language. And I mean,
And
there are other.
yeah, I was gonna say, like, even if you don't end up using that tool, it still opens you up to think about things differently, right? I'm rebuilding our music technology class right now, and just introducing like the beginning of physics of sound, and that's incredibly overwhelming. Like, you could spend you can spend years studying the physics of sound, like trying to explain, what a decibel is, like,
Yeah.
right? I'm just like, no way. But big picture, you can just talk about it. It has to do with volume and how the proportion of loudness, and it's a measure of how loud something sounds. Oh, that makes sense. But then if you're talking about sound pressure and and all these other parameters, it can get lost really quickly. And so, what I really like about your advanced classes is that they will take these, because the class that I'm redesigning is for first year students, people that are coming in, freshmen. But it's like, get your toes in the water and get some language, get a basic understanding of stuff. And then that way, when you move out of this class, you can say, all right, I want to do this. What tools did I get that will help me solve that problem? And which building blocks, which pieces am I missing to help me actually finish what my vision is?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it could be, it's like, from a professor's standpoint, it's like a little bit like overwhelming, because you're like, I can't leave anything out. And then you realize, well, I've got what, 32 classes, 32 hours we have contact with, and I could spend 32 hours talking about the physics of sound. Like, you got to just let it go, because you're going to get one day talking about the physics of sound. And if you're interested, go to our friends in media, go to someplace else, and really dig in deeply, if that's what you're into, right?
Yeah, and the one thing I do really love about the textbooks that I use for the Max class is that they set up the textbooks as a theory chapter and a practice chapter.
Yeah.
Theory chapter gives you all the theory behind what you're doing.
Nice.
And the practical chapter tells you, okay, you learned all this, here's how you're going to program it. So one of my absolute favorite topics to teach, especially to younger kids, not like high school and younger, is the idea of timbre.
Yeah.
How timbre, like, essentially there are three parameters of sound, pitch, amplitude, and duration. And timbre is the combination of all three of those, but it's constantly moving. So, and like that using the, like, going into a classroom, obviously, like, probably not going to be able to do so much of this, but going into a class, the grand piano, and doing the thing where you silently depress the lowest C and then you play every note in the overtone series,
Right.
and then all hear the lowest C coming out of the sympathetic vibrations, and it's like that kind of stuff is just so fun for me, because students don't really think about sound that way. They don't even necessarily think about their instrument that way. you know,
Right, because they think about the fundamental pitch, like what we hear, and that's it. And then what makes a piano sound different than a clarinet, than a trumpet, all playing the same exact pitch, even a sine wave producing that same pitch. Like, why do they sound different except they're the same, you know, trained musician, they're the same note. They're in the same, like, it's still C4, but why does it sound different? Because of all of these other things.
Yeah, because of the harmonic and inharmonic partials at very
Right.
specific amplitudes, at very specific durations over the decay of the sound. Yeah, and that's
And then
actually
how can you, like, you try to create a digital sound, a patch, without sampling? How, based upon all the science of the sound of this particular note, here's what I got. And you're like, it doesn't quite sound right. But
yeah,
that's the best we can figure out right now.
yeah, yeah, and I mean that stuff is just so fun for me to teach.
Yeah.
Just because it's guaranteed there's always going to be a student in there who's like,
Yeah, for sure.
did not think about sound in that way, and that's actually an experiment I do when I started off. It's like, okay, here's here's an A, and we're going to listen to 4 different instruments play that same A. It's always a flute, oboe, clarinet, tune, and just like without telling them, and I actually show them the spectrograph that shows them the partials, and it's like, okay, what are we hearing? They can always identify the oboe. That is so easy. You know, an oboe sounds like an oboe, but the clarinet and the bassoon in its high register, they're pretty close. You know, it's always interesting to hear, like, well, you know, how are you thinking about this? You know,
Mm-hmm.
how are you determining? And then the super fun thing is to start doing some, I cannot overtone sing, but I
Oh,
can get there. You know,
yeah.
it's especially when you do the ooh, like the ooh to you sound,
Yeah.
that you always get a huge um uptick in your upper partials when you're making that transition. And I do that with the graph so they can actually see the partials.
Yeah.
Like, that's timbre. Your voice, your mouth, and your vocal tract are the most sophisticated timbral producing instrument that has ever been created. Language is based on timbre. Like, if we didn't like, if we weren't able to, you know, move our mouths and our vocal tract and our tongue and our
Yeah.
teeth and everything like that, if we weren't able to do that, we wouldn't have language. And that's like, just like, you go from, well, what's the difference between a oboe and a clarinet, to how are we able to speak and have language? Like, that's it right there. Like, our sound producing apparatus here is the most complex and complicated filter that has ever been designed. Like, that's just so cool to me.
Yeah. And then it's overwhelming trying to teach it in some ways too. I keep saying overwhelming because I feel like everything is just pressing on. But yeah, the idea of, like, once you get in, you can visualize sound. You can start to see some of this. And it kind of, it demystifies it, but it makes it even more elusive.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's kind of the way I feel about like, more elusive, and you keep wanting to tug at that thread. That's what Max is for me. You
Oh,
know,
wow.
I've been working with, I don't know how many years. It's over a decade at this point. But I keep like, I got to learn more. Oh, that's so cool. I can do that. I was doing that wrong for so many years. How did I not know how to do it the correct way? You know, and it's just something that, if you're into it, man, that's a lifelong pursuit, I feel
That's
like.
awesome.
Until you know, cycling 74 and Max goes under and I have to change to some other, like, programming language, which, I mean, obviously has happened. You know, like,
Yeah.
people in the 90s, they didn't have Max. They were working in like C and, you know, Music 5 and, you know, all these old programming languages. But I think Max will be around for a
All right.
while.
Well, I hope it is, for your sake. Hey, before I let you go, Rob, because we're kind of reaching our It's great to chat. So if we have like any parting words of wisdom to like some incoming students at OU, like for in music, it's going to be a weird semester, so it doesn't have to be focused on COVID, but like, kind of a welcome thing to people. What would you say?
Man, it is going to be weird, and I remember when my very first semester of undergrad, I came in and I was expecting to study with, I was a percussionist, and I was expecting to study with the percussion professor who I had met at the audition, and he was like this big name, and I was super excited to study with him. And then I got assigned to a grad student.
Hmm.
I was like, oh, well, that's not what I was hoping for. That's not what I was expecting. But then this grad student, Dave Pascarella, I had the best semester with him ever. So even though it's going to be, it's going to be weird, it's going to be different, it's not going to be what you were expecting, that doesn't mean some amazing things can't come out of it.
Right.
So just try, I would say, just try to go in with like, openness. And I mean, I would say this no matter if we were in COVID or not. Like if you're an incoming student, just like be open, say yes, get into musical situations that you wouldn't normally find yourself in.
Because it might open you up to things that you would have never experienced otherwise. Like there's going to be a ton of value, a ton of great things to take away.
Ton of great things. Honestly, that was advice that was given to me when I moved to China. I lived in
Okay.
China for years, and my wife's sister, who was actually living there before us, and then we kind of crisscrossed. She went back to the States, and we went over to China within like 2 months. But when we were kind of asking for advice, this is a brand new thing. I'm getting into this. It's my entire world is going to change. What's your advice? And that was her advice. Just say yes. Okay. You don't know what good things can come from it. Like just try to eliminate some of your try to eliminate some of your hesitation. Try to forget about like the kind of silo you've built yourself into musically right now. Just get into anything and everything, because you never know where it's going to take you, and the career path you have in mind right now. I mean, I was supposed to be a band director, and now I'm a college professor in composition and electronic music.
Yeah.
When did that like turn happen? Because I followed what was kind of interesting to me, and I did a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be really important this semester. Just remember that, even though it's weird, like good things are still going to happen.
Right on. Well, thanks to Rob Rob McClure for joining us here, colleague at OU, having really great conversations. I feel like I just want to have like a lot of these. It's really cool.
Oh,
yeah. So we will. But yeah. So check out Rob. It's MCCLEUR at Ohio.
The
No,
email
your
address?
email MCC.
MCCLURER
I messed it up. All right. So, send him an email if you have any questions about this stuff. I'm sure Rob would love to hear from you. But anyway, that's great. And if you let us know what you think. I don't know how to end one of these. This is the first one we've done. So, but it's been a real pleasure. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this, Sean.